You're muted, Max. You're talking.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
There we go. So it's noon. We'll call the meeting of the May 22nd Bartlett Finance Committee to order. If we could, Sharon, if you'd go around the room to say who's in the room, so we have a record of that, and just so I know as well.
Yeah, sure. Angela Davis is here. Deb Johnson's here. Hal Geiger. Dr. Brent Tingley's here. Kim McDowell, Chad Brown, and Gail Moorhead.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I see that we have Deborah Kelsch, Beth, Jeannie Muck, Joe, and myself online here. For the agenda, I'd like to suggest, if we can, Brent and Jeannie, that we move item X of new business to follow the executive session, item number 12. So move 10 to after 12, if that's okay with you guys.
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. Is there anybody here for public participation? Seeing and hearing none. Approval of the minutes. We have the April 17th minutes. Can I have a motion to approve those?
I move we approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
Great. We'll consider those approved. And so we are to item 6, which is April review. I'm still excited about the fact that these are barely 22 days old, so we're very timely. So thank you to your team there, Angela, and have at it.
Thank you, Committee Chair. All right, so April was a strong operational month. We ended with a net profit of $426,000. That means our year-to-date loss is $112,000. However, that does not include a couple of extraordinary items. So we are going through the process of putting in an insurance claim for the wildfire sprinkler break revenue loss. And we have not processed that. We had to have an end date to when the construction was done and we started moving people back into those rooms before we could file that claim. A conservative calculation is $566,000 in lost revenue. That is based off of the Medicare rate per business day, per bed, excuse me. Now, there are typically some discounts in insurance processes that usually they make you wait so many days before it's effective. Then they use a factor to increase it. So I don't expect that full 566, but it should be something substantial to reimburse us for that revenue loss. The other piece that we are working on is the operating room fire revenue loss, as well as full reimbursement of expenses. We did reserve about $250,000 in supply reimbursements on the replacements for the supplies and the instruments that were in the OR that were damaged from the fire and from the smoke and contamination. But we did not reserve for the revenue yet. The reason is under GASB, we can't until the forensic accountants do their process. And we have a more reasonable estimate on what that's going to be. But right now, our top line math shows that it's probably around $275,000 per OR. So there's about a little over $500,600,000. It is not reflected in these financials. We have better information and we're able to book that, we will. But that puts us in a much better position. So what you're seeing is that year-to-date $12,000 loss includes the impact of the being down, as well as wildfire court not having any resident rooms for months. The overall revenue was strong. We finished April with a gross patient revenue of $27.6 million. That exceeded budget by 22.9%. So very strong revenues. We saw a lot of growth in outpatient areas, with the two most notable being mammography of over 27.6% and physical therapy at 19%. Our contractuals are up, but that is consistent with our gross revenue. Remember, we're flatlining contractions at the 45.6% contractual discount rate that we experienced in fiscal year 25 to streamline that. We were experiencing some lag in collections in March. In April, we saw a lot of that recover. So at the end of March, we were lagging to prior year by 1.1%, even though our gross revenues were up 8%. There's a big differential and downward focus. At the end of April, we were up to prior year 2.2%. So we made up a 3.3% swing. So significant traction by our CMT during April. We're continuing that progress. We're not taking our foot off the gas. So it's going to continue to be our major focus. We're going to continue with those weekly RCM meetings and driving those connections. If we are successful in achieving a collection rate consistent with last year, then we will be in a good place at the end of June. If we do not make up that additional difference, our gross revenues are up 8%. Our collections are only up 2.2% over prior year. That difference is $6 million. So if we don't hit on the collections, that will hit the P&L and it will go into reserves. So that's why it continues to be our focus, and we will drive very hard to make that.
Okay. Are you pausing for questions?
I am pausing for questions.
Brent or Jeannie, do you guys have any questions at this point?
No questions for me. It sounds like things are moving in a good direction.
Yeah, no question, but
I just have a couple of things I'd like to follow up on. In line 37, interest income isn't booked yet. I assume that's because we haven't gotten the number from CBJ. Is that right?
That's actually a misclassification. It gets booked under interest expense, which is why it's showing so low to budget.
Oh.
We have to reclass that into interest income. You will note that interest income is trending low simply because of where we're sitting at with the flow through from CBJ.
Okay. And how much is that?
That was 53,000.
53. Okay. All right, great. So no effect on bottom line. So on the Wildflower Court results, I assume that the reason we have the operating loss for Wildflower Court is because we're still lagging. We're about 100 bed days light April of 26 versus 25. And we were kind of punched up around that, 1,600 or plus bed days, and we just haven't gotten back there yet. And could you just speak to that a little bit about why we're a little low on revenue and we're high on expenses, but also why patient days haven't recovered from the issues that we had in January?
Right. Well, the residents began moving back into their rooms on April 9th. So
Okay.
they're facing after that. So it wasn't the full month of April.
Got
And as of yesterday, Jim had reported that we were at 57 residents, which is back to our full status. So we are seeing that we will have some ebb and flow as normal with residents discharging, but we have some that are pending their referrals that are waiting into the resident. So we are starting to get back to our normal laws, but that is why our revenues for them.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. You want to keep going then?
Absolutely. So the next piece to speak to is accounts receivable and cash. So accounts receivable only increased 476,000 over prior month. And that was due to the very heavy collection efforts because we did have a substantial increase in revenues and charges. So not seeing that flow through is good. The cash decreased 1.9 million and it shows very low, but there's a specific reason for that. Even though the team collected more cash, we had a third payroll hit on April 30th. So even though the payroll was made first, it pulled from our bank on April 30th. So there's a $3 million payroll that funded right at the fund. And that was the third payroll in from a cash perspective. So that's why cash is very low.
Okay.
That's all I have on the balance sheet. Any questions on balance sheet?
Sharon, could you go to page 11, please? The ratios. So let's focus on and going back to your comments about receivable and collections. So if we're looking for just based on the direction you're going, so I'm looking at the second row here, the days in AR, and we were in the 60s range up through about August, and that's when it started ticking up. And so we've seen some positive movement here the last this last month. So May, June, July, where do you see this going, Angela?
I would expect that this continues to drive down towards the low 70s, high 60s. That is our goal for the end of June.
For the end of June, okay.
It is a stretch.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, so you're expecting to see some really positive continued movement on that, which will help both cash and reduce that AR. And specifically on hospice and home health, how is that billing process going now that we've brought that in-house?
So we had our first full month of bringing that in-house. The team was able to identify a lot of work to clean up billings that were unbilled, issues that had not been maintenance by the billing company. So that work has been done. We did see quite a bit of that process. There's still more work to be done with it. And we have been trying to think where my note was on that. We have seen 168,000 that was not billed that is now being processed. So that's where we look at in recapturing some of what was unbilled. I don't have a number yet on what is still pending in total, but we are seeing improvement on home health and hospice financials. So at the end of December, we were trending towards a net loss between the two programs of 1.4 million. As of the end of April, we're trending at 1.5.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and Sharon, if you could go down to page, that's kind of where I wanted to go next. If maybe start on page 15, we might go back to 14. And so this 127,000 in revenue on line 4, that's a lot of that's catch up, right?
It is, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, nevertheless, it's good. And even though it's not quite as dramatic on the previous page on 14, that's a big chunk of or big reason why the home health revenue was up. In the current month as well. So, I mean, you're really doing on your top line, you're doing pretty good against your budget. I mean, all things considered, we've got a little catch up to do on hospice, but honestly, there's kind of some encouraging trends there. I mean, what's your sense about that in terms of hospice and home care? I mean, are we kind of getting our feet under us in terms of, just the overall operational cadence of the business there, Angela?
As far as operational cadence, I would defer to Ken on that piece.
Okay.
Home health and hospice.
For the enrollment, for patient enrollment.
and overall operational improvements.
I think overall it's going well. I mean, Aaron's made a big impact on identifying some things to streamline processes, education, and increasing, having productivity standards. We have some changes coming that will help, I think, drive enrollment in both of those programs as we move forward. So I would anticipate we'd see some significant growth, probably by the end of July, beginning of August timeframe. We have plans in place to be more vocal in the community and do more education with providers face to face to have them understand what hospice is, and how we can help the community with those programs.
Got it. And the benchmarks that are on page, if you go to 21, Sharon, and either Kim or Angela, I'm not sure who's best, just to maybe speak to these charts, who's prepared these charts, and I'm kind of particularly interested in the benchmarks that are present on some of those charts, what the source of those benchmarks are. If you could just talk, get us a little bit more up to speed on what we're seeing here.
I will, give me a few minutes. I'm going to see if Aaron can pop on. I thought he was going to be here today. So he might just be running late.
Hey, you know what? I'll tell you what, if he comes on, great, and we can talk about it, but we could also come to it next month, Kim, as well. So I really appreciate these. I thought these are really good additions here and appreciate them a lot. We just want to understand what we're seeing a little bit better on all these. So yeah, so we'll put a placeholder, and if Aaron comes on, great. If not, we'll pick it up in May. Anything else, Angela, on finance?
Just quickly on the fiscal year 26 audit, we have already started loading some interim files. We expect the field work to be done the week of August 10th and 17th. And we have a pre-meeting with CBJ Finance Department, our audit team, and potentially their audit partner to discuss the game plan and make sure we have everything lined for the upcoming audit.
Yeah, great. Okay. And when is that planning meeting?
The planning meeting is in June. I have to get a specific date.
Yeah, okay. All right. That's great. That's good to hear. Okay. Thank you very much. Jeannie or Brent, do you guys have anything further? Or anybody else on the board? Any questions?
Nothing from me.
Okay. All right. Okay, next up is item number 7, the 340B settlement achievement. Angela?
Yes, sir. So there was a 340B settlement with multiple vendors that was done 3+ years ago. This is reserved for, it is an outstanding liability on the balance sheet. This has gone through accounting firms and legal. Letters were sent out. However, very few who were involved have reached out and settled their accounts. We've had one that paid out last year for $43,000. We have one that will pay out this year for $150,000. It is now at the point that we can issue fees to the state, so we can turn the funds over to the state and remove the liability from our books. So we are going to go ahead and send out the notification requirements in July, maybe June, but by the deadline in July, to notify them that they can either reach out to us to settle the account or their money will be sent to the state. And then if we do not receive anything back on those accounts, that list of accounts will be filed on the November 1st report to the state of Alaska and a check sent in, so it is no longer.
Gotcha. And can you walk us through the amounts that we're sending to the state again, please?
Yes, sir. So it is just under $1 million.
Just under $1 million. And yeah, of the total that we had originally booked was around 1.2 million. Is that right?
That is correct. It's 1.2 even. And There have been payments against that with the 43 and the 150, which will bring us up to about 943, 947, something like that.
Yeah, and I know we have Joe, and Joe is on mute. I don't know if he's able to join us, but I think it's, especially for, I think it'd be good to just really quickly kind of remind everybody what happened on that and why we're having to pay $1.2 million related to old 340B related activity back in, I think it was as late as 2020, 2021 timeframe, 22 maybe. And it's generally compliance related, is it not, Joe?
Yeah, it's a compliance issue. So when they set up the contract pharmacies between us and I believe it was Safeway and maybe Costco, they had providers that were providing services under that contract pharmacy that were not Bartlett employees. So when they set the program up, it wasn't done compliantly, and so it was a massive compliance issue that was found by one of the pharmacy staff, is my understanding.
Yeah. And it went on for a period of a couple of years or more, right?
That's my recollection. I wasn't there. Gail may be able to speak to the time frame better.
No, I don't think we need to get into it. I think part of the reason I want to be wary about it, because we spent a lot of time at the time, talking about kind of what happened in the failure. And it's actually noted there's some footnotes around that in our old financial statements, and it hadn't been, went on for a couple of years where it just was kind of happening and nobody seemed to be paying attention. For me, it's a reason to be cautious and careful as we move forward to any new 340B program, because the last thing we want to have to do is be paying out $1 million settlements, back to the state. Angela, anything further on that?
No, sir.
Okay. So that brings us to the next item, which is the CBJ 340B memo starting on page 22. Joe?
So
I'm
I
sorry.
hope everyone.
Hey, Joe,
Yep.
hold tight just a second. I'm seeing we have Aaron here now. Aaron, can you talk to the dashboard information for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. So the referrals and admissions, that's pretty much been, I believe, standard in the past as far as seeing those data points. Home health hospitalization and ED visits, that is likely a new data element that's being presented. This is part of the home health payment model, quality metric that, there's a benchmark where we want to fall within. And we're seeing that we're really doing a good job at being below the industry as far as patients who are going back into the hospital or being seen in the ED. Conversion, I'm assuming there's no question about that. We're seeing an uptick in hospice, and from January, February, an uptick in home health. But remember that volume, it's a very small number. And so if you have one referral for hospice and you have the patient dies prior to coming home, well, that's a 0% conversion. And so it is important to understand what the volume and so the N would be. But you do see the referrals up above that. LUPA, I believe that's a new metric that's been reported on. That's low utilization, often indicated by a patient who is discharged from the hospital or comes on to home health and then has a quick return to the emergency room or to the hospital where they are admitted. And once they're admitted, they're considered discharged from home health, and that's a low utilization. And so Medicare gives us a initial lump sum payment based upon a lot of factors. When you don't meet the minimum threshold of visits, which oftentimes it's somewhere between 2 and 4, they say, well, we've overpaid you, so you have to pay that a certain sum of money back. You basically only get paid an equivalent of how many visits you might have made. So if the projected payment might have been $1,500 and you only made one visit, you might only receive $200 of that initial $1,500 that was paid to you. So you, in effect, have to pay that back. ADC is historic as well. Now then, home health timely care initiation, that is a quality metric that a lot of work had been done on this, but I think as I said in my board packet, this is the documentation. A lot of times referrals are sent where the patient might still be in Seattle or in Anchorage, and there was not an understanding that you needed to update the date of ordered start of care, because if the patient was not even in Juneau, you're meeting the requirement of 48 hours from that physician time start of care. You'd be outside of that. And so since I've been here, that has been an area that we have put a lot of time in on. If the patient refuses, no, I'd like you to come next week. No, I want you to come the week after. We have to document that it was because of the patient. And when we submit the OASIS, that start of care, it needs to reflect the revised date that the clinician's able to put on.
Got it. Jeannie or Brent, do you guys have any questions on these at this point?
I don't.
Nope, nothing from me, thanks.
I'd like to just go back and make sure I understand a few things on here. So the benchmarks that are on the middle three, are those national benchmarks, Aaron?
They are.
Okay. And so this was probably silly, but the benchmark, you want to be over the conversion percent benchmarks, right?
Within the benchmark, it says you're meeting the
within.
benchmark. Yeah.
Okay.
So
within.
if you go over the benchmark, like some of the home health and hospice agencies that resulted in why we have a moratorium right now on new agencies starting, is they might have been at 100% conversion. Well, if you're going to say that every patient is appropriate, that's an issue that you want to make sure you're still, you just expect that some people are not going to be appropriate.
Gotcha. So we want to be in that range. Okay. I'm glad I asked that. Why was the LUPA so high in 25 relative to where we are now?
So it could be, it's variable based upon the census of patients that you have. So if you have a smaller number of patients and one patient goes into the hospital or two patients goes into the hospital, that LUPA percentage is based upon how many of those patients had that event occur. And so because our number is so small, one or two can signify that. But it also, one of the ways you manage LUPA is by making sure you have sufficient staffing, that you have systems in place, processes, that we're accepting the right type of referrals. So if a patient is coming to us that really is doesn't have the opportunity for measurable goals, home health is supposed to not be for chronic care. It's supposed to be for somebody who has had a surgery or needs rehabilitation for something. But I believe that historically there has been a lot of patients that, you go out there and they're like, yeah, we don't really want to do it, or they don't have caregivers that you can teach. And so when you're measuring where did you start, which is the initial OASIS assessment, which is a data collection tool, and then when you discharge the patient, if there was no improvement, well, then that patient probably may not have been appropriate to begin with, and there's a higher risk that that type of patient is going to go back to the hospital often because they're not able to manage their chronic conditions in a way that would prevent that hospitalization. And then there's just nothing we could do about those patients that are non-compliant. We can teach. But there are, they call them frequent flyers. You know, I've seen names come up a lot, and I think it's we need to identify those individuals at the get-go. And home health is not always the right care. And so we want to make sure we're caring for those people who have the potential to benefit from the home health benefit, which is about rehabilitation and proving where they were starting from.
That's excellent. Thank you. And I want to focus on the 2 average daily census charts on the bottom left there, and let's do hospice first. And you maybe you know, but there are statistics out there around the number of hospice Medicare beneficiaries who end life with hospice and hospice services, and I don't remember what that is. I think it's around half, or maybe even better than half. And you know, when you look at a average daily census of 5, that seems very low to me. I mean, who are we missing there? I mean, what should we expect if, you know, if we continue to work and grow this program, that average daily census number getting up to, Aaron?
The average daily census, so there are metrics that indicate success. Average daily census, you could be at an average daily census of 5 and have a positive margin. And it's how many days of care. Like that 5 doesn't show that we had actually 7 admissions, or sorry, 6 admissions that month, but we may have had 5 deaths that month. So
Yeah.
it's that churn and burn. If it really is about the hospice length of stay, which I added to the board report, that you want to measure how long are patients receiving hospice. So we've got to, if we could increase the length of stay, if we could, instead of 5 days, 10 days, yes, your average daily census is going to go up. You're going to spend less money on managing those acute symptom management heavy staff need. But average daily census alone is not a metric of success. It's about days of care, and it's about length of stay, where you start to know whether or not it's sustainable. And to see that we're having a higher conversion, that means likely we're getting patients either out of the hospital sooner, or we're and giving them a few extra days, or we're having better ability to talk to patients and families and even providers about, you know, hospice isn't giving up. It's about the comfort, the symptom management, the support. And so the more we can do that, the higher likelihood that ADC will go up. But there's, you know, just like with the home health stuff, there's about 20 other quality and financial indicators that we're not, that I'm looking at, that that measure success, and we've made significant headway on those. But I didn't want to overload anybody at this point, because I think there's still a lot of education happening.
Yeah, thank you. So, again, these are excellent. I'm not being critical. Could we add that length of, so what we're hearing from you is the length of stay is very, I mean, the conversion's important, referrals and admissions is important. ADC maybe isn't so important, but length of stay is important, correct?
It is on hospice, not on home health.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I want to talk about home health.
It is on the board packet. I did add the hospice percentage of patients that where they fell between 0 to 7 days, 8 to 30, 31 to 90, 91 to 179, and 180 plus. And that's the metric that you look at for like the health of where you're at as far as a lot of short length of stay. And by the way, Juneau, Alaska is 50% of patients die on hospice, which is the lowest in the country. And there are appropriate reasons for that. I believe, though, we could at least increase the duration of patients being on hospice to receive the benefit.
Gotcha. Great. Aaron, thanks for hopping on and
Hey,
sharing this
can I just ask
information.
a quick question?
Yeah,
Yes.
have that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. This is super interesting, and I just want to make sure I understand kind of the education point in all of this. So not only is it better, I mean, my assumption is it's better for us financially to have people on hospice for a longer period of time, but is it also true that it is better for the patients? So if
Absolutely.
somebody starts hospice earlier, they're getting care and support at home, and it could potentially lead to them living longer, even though they're on hospice.
We now that I've been here long enough, I've seen patients when I got here in February that were on home health, and they were resulting in the hospitalization number going up because they had low blood pressure, and they kept on going back and forth to the hospital every time they took a shower or got up. And I was like, I think that patient should be on hospice. And the last hospitalization, they were referred to hospice. That patient
Yeah.
has not fallen, has not been to the hospital. We were able to recommend changing some of the medications. And that patient is living a much more comfortable life. And I guarantee you his symptoms are better, and his length of stay, his life expectancy has increased, still not greater than 6 months, but it is better than what would have happened if he had continued to go back and forth to the hospital.
Right. I have have experience. My father was on hospice, and he was enrolled, and he lived for 6 months, and they kicked him off hospice. And then he was off hospice for like 4 months, and then he went back on again and died a few weeks later. But I think that story is like the one that I don't know that providers and family members and people really realize that hospice is. So thanks for sharing that. And I love the fact that the financial incentives for us are really aligned with what's best for patients.
Absolutely.
Not
And
always the case.
I shared some of this data with a nurse that we have here, and he's young. And he's like, oh, no, I'm a money man. And I'm like, yes, it might seem like this is money, but it's everything that we're doing is about patients, and Medicare wants us to provide these services. And if we're underutilizing them, patients suffer, and Medicare reimburses us to provide these services. And so it is a win-win. If we don't meet patient needs, then we can't be sustainable, and we can do both.
Yeah, and I mean, and to Jeannie's point about alignment, I mean, the reason the board has made the commitment, this long-term commitment to hospice and home care, is because the services are so badly needed in Juneau and so important. And so it's like, we're not in this to make money. And if we're providing really good services, then it'll help to, on the financial side for the hospital, but the focus needs to be on patient quality and education out there in the community too. So,
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Aaron, for this. Okay, Joe, back to you. 340B.
340B. So earlier this month, if my timing's right, there was a submission through CBJ that was done by Robert Barr on the use of the 340B program to help save CBJ money through the 340B program. I was able to go down and talk to the assembly members, tried to educate them on the complexities of the program, just know how this works. And not saying that this isn't a potential but we are have to dig into this. Having past compliance issues with the 340B program, we're going to do our due diligence to make sure this is possible. Theoretically, this is an option, but it's probably step 20 on a 25-step process. And we are just getting off to step 1. And so, having said that, there is a chance that this could come to fruition. The savings would have to be to benefit Bartlett, and then CBJ could potentially be a co-beneficiary of that benefit. Going back to that, we are digging into this to make sure we're going to follow all the rules and be compliant with this program. We are looking at stepping off into contract pharmacies again. Now that we have 2 primary care clinics, we will be changing the status of those clinics to either provider-based or rural health clinics, both of those eligible as child sites to the hospital. What this means is any script written through those clinics would be eligible for 340B. And so we are getting going on this process. But I wanted to make sure that the finance committee and the board was aware of what's going on with this process and to see if there's any questions that I could answer to the committee.
Jeannie or Brent?
I have one question. I think I know. So in order for a CBJ employee to be eligible for 340B, they would have to see a Bartlett physician.
Correct.
Is that correct? So having working with the city insurer on this 340B could have some other advantages if the city plan in some way incentivized employees to use Bartlett physicians.
Correct. Yeah. And
So it could be a benefit beyond just the city could save money on 340B.
absolutely. The patients would have to be, our clinics would have to be the preferred provider for the
Right.
CBJ policy.
Yeah. So that's a positive in that it kind of helps turn this tide of CBJ incentivizing their employees to go other places.
Yeah, it redirects the patient back to Bartlett.
Yeah.
Joe, the $1.5 million that Robert Barr has in his, I mean, it just seems to me that that's kind of a big round number. And I'm curious what the meat is behind that. Can you speak to what could generate that kind of savings for them?
Well, I've actually seen his analysis, but when he looks at the top 30 most costly drugs, what he's pulling is the differential, the total 340B savings on those drugs, is my understanding. And so that pass through would not be directly to CBJ. So what he's looking at is the cost of those 30 drugs directly through the vendor or through 340B, and that's the total savings, if that makes sense.
Okay, so that's not CBJ savings though, correct?
No, that would be total potential savings, but there's other costs included in this that we're not taking into consideration.
Yeah.
So there's fills, there's cost to fill the drug, there's management of the pharmacy. You have to have a vendor to run the virtual inventory. So there's other costs too. So this is kind of a pie in the sky look of it.
Yeah. So I guess moving forward, especially when you start talking about contract pharmacies and what we went through when we were kind of analyzing what happened on this last time, we need to have some sort of Gantt chart's not a very good description we're looking for, but kind of a step by step in terms of what Bartlett's ongoing, where we are, what you're evaluating, and where the steps are, because I think that this is, we defer, and rightly so, operations of the hospital to our CEO, but given the fact that we had such a significant loss the last time we attempted this program, I think it's appropriate at a minimum that you really keep us informed in terms of where this is going. And so if you could, I don't necessarily want it as a standing agenda item. I'm not asking for that, but I do think it's important that we have a little bit of a frame around what this is, especially the contract pharmacy, the compliance side. I mean, I guess that's probably my biggest concern, is that if we're going to do this, we do it right. And the value to this is the value to Bartlett. And if there's some indirect or tertiary benefit that we get by bringing in more CBJ employees into the hospital, that's great. But the primary benefit is that, we're running a program effectively. So I don't know. I don't mean to ramble here, but I do want to make sure that we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's on this program. I'm a little worried about, especially if we start getting pressure from city, based on some pie in the sky, to use your words, of a savings number that may or may not be realistic. That, we're not going down a path that's going to create some harm for the hospital down the road.
I agree 100%, Max. And thinking about that, like the 340B, why there are financial benefits, 90% of the work is around compliance. And so there's lots of work that has to be done. So we could have a report that goes to a compliance committee that gives updates periodically on where we're at. Because if you're doing it right, you should have, quarterly audits. You should be double checking your stuff and working with your vendor to make sure that it's done appropriately. You should never go more than 3 months without knowing there's an issue.
Yeah. Did I hear somebody wanting to chime in?
No, I just agreed with Joe. That was the problem last time, is it was left to the vendor without any oversight.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Hal.
Well, so I'm getting a little bit worried here that we're talking about making our primary care the preferred provider. If we start trying to direct patients away from, I think Valley Medical Care is the last independent provider, so it'd be just them, away from Valley Medical to us, we're running the risk of having some level of dissension and unhappiness on the part of the providers. Joe, can you explain a little bit about what your plan is there for patient poaching, or lack of a better term?
Yeah, that's the most complicated piece of this, Hal. It's something I've actually thought about quite a bit on how we do that. And to be honest, I haven't come up with a good answer on how we move that piece of it forward. Because we do have some CBJ enrollees that have extremely high cost drugs that drive up the cost of the program. And there would be a benefit to push them back. And so I don't have a good answer for you on how we work that. I'm gonna have to put more thought into it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Joe, what I'd like you to do is maybe put some thought into this, as you say, between now and the next meeting or July meeting, and something that speaks to, I guess, one is the steps on moving forward. So it's really clearly laid out for this committee what the steps are to a 340B program from where we are now to where ultimately we could end up. So what are those steps? And then what are the compliance checks that are important? I think that's really an important piece of this for me, is, what are those compliance steps? And I think your idea of taking it through the compliance committee is excellent. And, but reporting back, here's kind of what the compliance piece of this looks like, so that we can all be better educated on that. And then the third piece, to Hal's point, if you could, give us some more information about, just the overall program administration, how this is going to run, and how we do it the right way. So, does that sound fair and reasonable?
It sounds fair, yes.
Okay, so if Sharon, I want to make sure we capture those steps. And one is, the overall steps. Second is the compliance. Third is the, how to run the program effectively and in a way that is fulfilling our community mission, for the minutes. So, okay. Thank you very much for that. And staying with Joe, I think staying with Joe, housing update.
We are still waiting the finalization of our survey, so that has not been completed yet. And we have not received it, and that is still step one. I did reach out and leave a voicemail. I know that Melissa from Foundation has also reached out on several occasions. We just have not received a response today. Or we had it when I left the office.
Is that from Wayne?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get that one moving forward for next time. But Okay, so we'll have a little bit more. Hopefully the survey will be in the door. I mean, I know the snow
Okay.
kind of held things up for a while, right?
Yeah, that was the stop. That's what was stopping us before. But now that the snow is gone, we should be able to find those stakes and finish that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see, we moved item 10 to after item 12. So that brings us to committee comments and questions, and I'll start with Jeannie.
No comments, no questions.
Um, let's see, Brent.
Yeah, I don't have any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything either. Okay, and with that, I need a motion to go into executive session.
I move that the finance committee go into executive session.
Could you read on page 26, could you just read, I think we're supposed to read that into the record, aren't we, Sharon?
Finance Audit Committee, the Bartlett Regional Hospital recess and executive session to discuss matters, those which by law, municipal charter, and ordinance are required to be confidential or involve consideration of records that are not subject to public disclosure. Specifically, the CEO incentives for performance. Excuse me.
Going to recording. Or,
You need a second.
oh, yes. Thank you.
Jane.
Second,
Okay, let's see here. For executive session, let's,
Recording.
All right.
You want to bring in the.
Yeah, I'll bring in the.
yeah, let's let anybody come back in that needs to come in.
I'm Angela.
Are we ready, Sharon?
So I got Angela back in.
Okay, so we're on to item number 10 now, which is the memo that is on the screen here on page 24 of the packet. And we've had it in here. We just met an executive session about this, and I guess I would ask for a motion that's mapped out at the bottom of the page there.
I move the finance committee to approve the incentive measures as presented, move to the full board to authorize the board chair and finance chair to work with the CEO on the development of performance-based compensation.
Great.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. That's done. Okay, and that brings us to our next meeting, I believe. Let me go back to my agenda here real quick. Yeah, June finance meeting date and time.
I put that
So
on there, because, the reoccurrence, it landed on a holiday, so it landed on Juneteenth. So if you wanted to take it down to where you want the meeting earlier or later around that holiday, that week.
The earlier doesn't work because we're now reporting on part of the month.
Okay,
And I believe that is the one where the board meeting is June 23rd.
So the meeting, so what about, how about the 18th, Angela? Does that work? And for Jeannie and Brent, does that work for you guys?
I'm available the 18th, yeah.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. So does Sharon, from your vantage point, does that work? And Angela?
There's 20, we should be available on the 18th at the same time, around from noon to 1:30.
Yeah. Okay, so the next meeting will be June 18th at noon. Okay, unless there's anything more, then we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yes, we-